It says a lot about our great country that the son of a single mum who was a disability pensioner, who grew up in public housing down the road in Camperdown, can stand before you tonight as Australia's Prime Minister.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And Australia has a new government after a grassroots revolt against major party politics and a massive thumbs down for the Coalition and Scott Morrison. It was a vote for change, climate change action and people power as support for the Greens and Independents surged in what Sydney's Sun-Herald described as a seismic shift. And after a campaign that was devoid of vision, the winner's speech was full of it.
I want to find that common ground where together we can plant our dreams. To unite around our shared love of this country, our shared faith in Australia's future, our shared values of fairness and opportunity, and hard work and kindness to those in need.
In WA, the Liberal Party was smashed with a 10% swing to Labor, greeted with this euphoric front page in the Sunday Times.
WA says, "Hell yeah!"
While Sydney's Sunday Telegraph could not hide its distaste at the overall outcome.
Party crashes.
It was an extraordinary night, and as the TV networks went head-to-head in their election coverage, we were treated to a crazy new way to farewell the fallen, with 7 disposing of vanquished MPs by pricking their bubble.
And for Tim Wilson, let me get this finger. Tim Wilson, it is...
Gone.
Leaving the Canberra bubble.
And what about 7's much hyped...
Screen of Dreams.
It will bring you unrivaled instant analysis.
So, how did that go? Well, take a look for yourselves.
The votes are coming in now. You can see the map is being coloured as we go.
Yes, looks like your TV at home, as news.com.au joked.
The magical screen was literally just the computer monitor from Edwina Bartholomew's desk in the Sunrise production office.
Meantime, on 9, which in previous elections has given us the shredder, the crusher and the shark pool, we got this.
It is time to crank up the robot, crank up the baggage conveyor belt, go to Cuba and start sending them on their way.
And who is first?
And in what was the story of the night, the robot then whacked Liberal after Liberal after Liberal on their way. On the ABC, which easily won the ratings, Anthony Green's touchscreen was on fire. But it wasn't just a computer that was occasionally finding it hard to keep up with the chaos of it all.
We need to go to Anthony Green, who has some breaking news.
Yep.
Well, Galt, I think there's been some confusion here.
So, across the 6-week campaign, how did the media affect the result? Well, the Coalition's huge loss was also a smack in the face for the Murdochs, whose big city tabloids did their utmost to get ScoMo home, with Sydney's Daily Telegraph, as always, leading the charge. Our audit of their front pages found 11 that we judged to be negative towards Labor and 3 that were positive to the Coalition, with the rest being neutral. And the Telegraph's tone was set on day 2, after the Labor leader failed to name the unemployment rate, with its front page parroting the Libs' campaign slogan.
It's not so Albanese.
Man who wants top job, clueless about jobs.
4 days later, the telly was branding Labor's would-be Prime Minister lazy and incompetent.
Ad lib Albo.
ALP revolt over poll show.
Albanese accused of winging it.
And the following week, it was broadening its attack with this hoary old scare about power prices. Then, 2 days later, it went back to attacking the leader for another supposed gaffe during the first debate.
Albo's all at sea.
And 2 weeks after that, after another Albanese stumble, the telly was bashing him again.
Albo's 6-point disaster.
Not a
damn
idea.
Sorry.
News Corp's 2 other big tabloids, Brisbane's Courier Mail and Melbourne's Herald Sun, were almost as scornful and one-eyed, with the Herald Sun running 8 front-page stories that we judged negative to Labor, 1 positive to Labor, 5 positive for the Coalition, and the rest neutral. Most of the stories were the same as in the telly, highlighting gaffes and economic policy scares, but under different headlines. And up in Queensland, the Courier Mail was also knocking it out of the park for the blue team, running 8 front-page stories negative to Labor, 3 positive to the Coalition, 1 negative to the Coalition, and the rest neutral, to bring the final front-page score for all 3 Murdoch mastheads to 11 positive stories on the Coalition versus 1 on Labor, and 27 negative stories about Labor versus 1 on the Coalition, with attacks like these in the Courier Mail among the sharpest.
Amateur Albo.
Oh no, Albo fails again.
Is Anthony Albanese really up to this?
The Herald Sun, meanwhile, ran 2 memorable plugs for the Coalition, giving up the front page to embattled Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, whose seat of Kooyong was at risk, and a double-page spread inside.
Why you need to vote for me?
That was not enough to save him. Nor was this catchy cover on the Libs' last-minute housing policy enough to keep the PM in power.
ScoMo's home punt.
Despite it being echoed across the News Corp network in Brisbane, Adelaide and Sydney. As the award-winning journalist and academic Margaret Simons observed, reviewing this coverage,
Some of the content in News Corporation tabloids has read like political advertising for the Coalition.
or as her fellow Melbourne academic Dennis Muller put it in the conversation,
the evidence that News Corp has gone rogue during the current federal election is plentiful. It can be seen every morning in its newspapers across the country and every evening on Sky News After Dark. Going rogue here means abandoning any attempt at fulfilling one of the media's primary obligations to a democratic society, the provision of truthful news coverage, and instead becoming a truth-distorting propagandist for one side.
The tone at News Corp's national flagship, The Australian, was a bit less strident than the tabloids, but it was just as one-sided and unrelenting, with no less than 13 front pages taking aim at Labor's leader and its policies, with headlines about Albanese's economics, a stealth carbon tax, Labor's turbocharged deficits, and Albanese's support for boosting the minimum wage. No surprise, then, that the editorials in The Australian and the big city tabloids also urged readers to vote for the Coalition. And what about the Nine papers? Our audit of front pages showed The Age leaning markedly towards Labor, while the Sydney Morning Herald showed more balance between the two parties. Both their Friday editorials came out against the Coalition and its leader.
Morrison does not deserve another term.
For integrity's sake, our nation needs a change in government.
The Guardian, naturally, also backed Labor in its advice to voters, but we couldn't audit its front pages because it has none. So, did any of this have an effect? Well, News Corp's blitzkrieg certainly did not get the Coalition elected, or stem the Green and Independent tide, despite hit jobs like these on the Teal Independents on the front pages of the Herald Sun and Telegraph.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Teal conceal.
They've got to hide.
How these so-called independents conceal their agendas.
Which the News Corp tabloids backed up with weaponised double-page spreads inside, dumping on what they called
the arrogant minority.
A term that one might well apply to the Murdoch media. Equally ineffective was The Australian, which ran countless critical news stories on the Teal team and warnings like this from Greg Sheridan.
The most destructive, harmful and dangerous vote anyone can make in the forthcoming election is for a Teal Independent or the Greens. They are both a direct threat to our national security. The Teal Independents are not only populists, they are extremists.
Former Telegraph political reporter Malcolm Farr says News Corp's campaign was aimed at preserving a two-party political structure. Writing in The Guardian, he branded its coverage of independent candidates a brutal and relentless savaging, adding,
the singular story of election night was how News Corp couldn't convince voters to follow its course, at least not in the numbers needed. It is being seen as a demonstration of impotence in political affairs and of absence of authority in the group's claim to speak for the nation.
What News Corp did succeed in doing was help magnify doubts about Labor's leader and perhaps suppress the party's primary vote. Although Albo must share some blame for that because he was not impressive on the campaign trail and he was never a match for his media-savvy rival, who worked the press pack so well that they even turned his stumbles into triumphs.
Politics can be a bruising sport. as the self-confessed bulldozer goes on the charge for votes.
Scott Morrison demonstrates what he means about being a bit of a bulldozer.
That bulldozing moment on Wednesday played big on the 6 p.m. bulletins and on front pages next day, demonstrating the old truth that pictures lead and bolstering the narrative that the PM was a simple, energetic man of the people. And in this game of crafting the daily image, Morrison was the clear winner, with ball sports and cook-ups galore, and the PM smiling his way through photo-op after photo-op. And Morrison matched that with an ability to dead-bat even the curliest question in the daily press conferences. He was, as Age columnist Sean Carney noted at the start of the campaign, a relentless, campaigning cyborg.
Morrison is always on. He understands how to communicate succinctly and exploit signs of weakness in his adversaries. He is not that good at being a Prime Minister, but he knows how to present as one when it counts, at election time.
And even when the pressure was really on, like in this brutal final week assault from a current affair host Tracy Grimshaw, Morrison was polished and unflappable.
So where are you going to not be a bulldozer if you win this election? Where are you actually going to change? I mean, why have you said that you're going to change when you've just basically said that everything you've done's been OK?
Now, what I'm saying is that the times have required that level of strength.
It was Morrison's great advantage. 3 years of media training on the job, perhaps balanced by 3 years of voters getting tired of him. And by contrast, Albanese often looked clumsy. When he did play for the cameras with a simple prop to demonstrate Labor's push for a wage increase, it could look awkward.
But the idea that $1,
Get a dollar increase.
And he spoiled that trick last Sunday with another slip-up.
we are talking about a $1 a week increase.
I think you said $1 a week, it's $1 an hour, as you've also been pointing out this week.
A recurring media theme was Albanese supposedly running away from questions, as he did in Perth when Morrison was bulldozing down the footy field. And in the front line of the chasing pack were Nine's Jonathan Kersley and Sky's Jonathan Lee.
Isn't there a problem with transparency? We're following you for answers, Mr Albanese, and you're now just not giving them. You have to answer eventually.
Of course, the News Corp tabloids also ate that up.
Albo checks out.
Catch me if you can.
Flea circus.
Impatient reporters also made an issue of Labor hiding its policy costings and played that game for days. And when they were finally revealed, another row blew up as Labor tried to send the press back to Canberra to cover the announcement, with Sky's Jonathan Lee again in the thick of it.
Our job is to follow you around the country during the campaign so we can ask you questions. Is it not you distancing yourself from your own costings by trying to take the travelling media pack away from you? Let's be fair, Ethan. Like, you know the policy's been changed.
When you're finished...
Well, I just want you to be honest with us too.
It was pretty pathetic stuff. Dubious accusations, confected outrage and much ado about next to nothing. As the ABC's Laura Tingle, the current president of the Canberra Press Club, tweeted,
Sorry, but this is embarrassing for my profession.
Throughout the campaign, press conferences were notably more damaging for Albanese, partly because of the heat of the questions, but also because the PM was more adept at handling them.
In the case of Anthony Albanese, I think the press pack smelt blood in the water after his initial stumble on the unemployment rate all those weeks ago, and they keep going for the next stumble. And he hasn't really quite learnt the art of just running things his way.
But Labor supporters have no doubt that Albanese got the rough end of the stick. Today, WA Premier Mark McGowan labelled the Federal Press Gallery's treatment of him as insulting, intimidating and bullying.
They need to reflect on their behaviour. I've never seen anything like it.
And as Party President Wayne Swan said on 9...
Well, I think Anthony Albanese has been the subject of a massive press pile-on, and when the history of this election is written, parts of the media profession can hang their heads in shame.
But it's been his doing. It's not been a press pile.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't just been his doing. Many of the experienced journalists that I know who are covering this campaign are absolutely disgusted with the way in which sections of the press have behaved towards the Labor leader.
But it's not only Labor supporters who felt that some of the media's coverage of the campaign was a disgrace and that trivia often trumped the issues the country cared about. So, is that fair? Well, maybe. But if you set up for a circus, what do you expect? The major parties' campaign buses take the media on a daily tour of manufactured photo ops and often meaningless announcements. So why wouldn't reporters try to spice it up? If you want more than gotchas, puns and footy pics on the nightly news, journalists need to get off the bus and talk to more real voters, as they threatened to do some years ago. Whatever happened to that? Meanwhile, the media also love polls, and in this campaign we had them by the dozen. So how did they fare after their failure in 2019 to pick the result? Well, they did not foresee the extraordinary success of the Greens and Independents, but polling analyst Kevin Bonham reckons they did OK in spite of that.
Anyone saying the polls are wrong has no idea. The right side won, and the two-party preferred and vote shares are landing very much in the middle of them at the moment.
But that doesn't mean we didn't see some silly polling stories in the media, like this exclusive from 10 News last week, based on leaked Liberal polling, boosting the chances of Catherine Deves.
The Liberal candidate is still in the hunt to win the seat, trailing Independent Zali Steggall 47 to 53%. Too close for comfort in the eyes of many.
And how did that turn out? Not well. Steggall was returned with an increased vote, 61% to just 39% for Deves on the two-party preferred. And it wasn't a good night for Clive Palmer either, the supposed electoral kingmaker running candidates across the country. What did the billionaire get for his $100 million advertising blitz? Not one lower house seat. And finally, spare a thought after a tough weekend for Sky's Paul Murray, who, having failed to get his mate Morrison re-elected, is now leading the fight back.
Our laser-like focus is 1,000 days to take the country back from the mad left. It's actually 1,069. I added it up today.
And while Albanese strives to bring the country together, Murray won't be the only one at Sky pledged to divide it.
Now we are faced with 3 years of hardcore left-wing government that will destroy the fabric of this nation. I can't wait for, check my diary, early 2025. Put it in your diary too. Donald Trump will be sworn in as the next US president, or Ron DeSantis, and a few weeks later, Peter Dutton and the Liberals will be swept into power in Australia following 3 disastrous and incompetent years of a Teals-led Labor government.
And on it went. Strap in for at least 3 years of nightly resistance as Sky After Dark and other voices at News Corp try to push the Liberal Party further to the right. And that's all from us for tonight. There's more on our website where you can stream or download the programme. And don't forget, Media Bites every Thursday. But for now, until next week, goodbye.